Lead Time is a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective, hosted by Tim Allman and Jack Caliberg. Lead Time taps into biblical wisdom for practical solutions to today's burning issues. Each podcast confronts real-time struggles facing the local church in a post-Christian culture. Step into the action with the ULC at uniteleadership.org. This is Lead Time.
Happy day. Welcome to Lead Time. Tim Allman here with Jack Caliberg, and it is a beautiful day in the neighborhood here. I pray wherever you are listening, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And today we have one of my favorite people on planet Earth, Matt Engel. Matt, we've known you for just about a decade now. Matt and his wife actually were married at Christ Greenfield, where I get to pastor. Matt was on staff doing a lot of family ministry at Mission Community Church here in Gilbert, Arizona for a number of years. And then the Lord called him to use his strategic but people-focused big data mind to invite us. Matt, we go way back in the accelerator world with Leadership Network, and just listening to you talk over the years has been one of the most fascinating things, because you're kind of you're this hybrid guy who's been in the church, you understand church culture, and yet you are crazy into quantitative data, and big data, first, second, third party data. And
Creative
you've even
use of
written a book
technology.
with my friend Technology, even written a book with Eric Swanson called 14 Fridays. And we'll be talking more about that. You're a husband and father. More than that, you're a passionate Jesus follower who just wants to see the kingdom of God expand. So tell us, Matt, how did you become you? Just a little bit more of your story to fill in those gaps, bro.
Yeah, no, this is good. Thanks for having me. I think it was, I've always had a passion for patterns. And I wouldn't have said this growing up early on, but even me, looking back into my career as when I was playing sports and you name it, it was really fascinating, because one of the things that I had that was like a competitive advantage, but I didn't think about it back then, was I could tell patterns. I was like, in baseball, they're crowding me this way, he's pitching me this way, so I know what the next pitch is going to be. In lacrosse, it was like, this is their defensive scheme. I know how they're going to try to attack me from the offensive side. And so that's really what has kind of become more of the fruition of things, has been I really do like patterns. I like numbers, I like research, and I like theology, but I like more than anything the nexus of all of those together. And so even when I got my bachelor's, I went into my bachelor's around criminology and criminal justice, not because I wanted to be on the defensive side of enforcement. I really wanted to be on the offensive side. And again, I grew up in Gilbert, right? Down the street from the church there. And so it's not like it was a bad part of town, but I also had friends that were, that got busted by the cops for something. And I'm like, man, if I happen to know a lot of the police officers, because some of them went to our church actually growing up. And I'm like, man, I wish so-and-so would have known my friend that they're now arresting 6 months before, because they wouldn't have arrested them 6 months before. They probably would have pastored them or mentored them or led them in a different fashion. And right now they're just dealing with the repercussions. So that was why I went into what I did from my bachelor's. And then, the Lord had different plans, and he's it came down to my blood work. Actually, I couldn't pass the blood test for the Arizona standards. So I couldn't get into law enforcement. And so I was like, well, I like patterns. So what else is a pattern? And I started getting into organizational design and development, which is just, how to help organizations thrive a little bit more. And again, I look for patterns, and I'm like, wow, I really enjoy learning. I like looking at patterns. And lo and behold, when you do that, you end up doing what we're doing now as far as ministry goes, looking at patterns for churches to help them, get slightly better on where they're headed from that perspective.
So tell us more of what you do. How are you helping churches right now?
Yeah, so I think the big thing right now is after my time at Mission and us really, we took that big leap. We went from 1,500 to 2,000 with applying a lot of the logic that we had to bumping up against 10,000 people on a weekend, single campus, all live teaching, and that intersection led a mentor of mine actually to be in a meeting where he's, was being asked by a couple other people, like, we need a crazy pastor who likes data and research and knows theology. And he's like, I think I only know of one. He happens to mention like my name. So they asked if I'd be willing to help lead this city project. And from that, it really birthed into helping less on the programming side, right? Like content in church is not the problem. Like, you go down to Barnes and Noble and tell me content's a problem around marriage and family. It's like you can walk up and down the aisle and see 300 books. Mm-hmm. So it's not content being the problem. It's more about, and I say this term loosely because sometimes in church it gets overused, especially by like consultants. It's like, hey, we're going to help you with strategy. It's like, yeah, a consultant coming in helping with strategy is like somebody coming in with no responsibility to actually execute it. Whereas I like to come in and say, hey, let's think about what you're already doing, because that's your strategy. And then from that, let's apply some of this other logic that has happened across the faith ecosystem and say, hey, we've learned this over here. Does it mean the same over here with you? And it's fascinating when you look at it. I mean, you can take a Lutheran church, and I've used some of the stuff you guys have done and worked with, one of the largest churches in the world, going, hey, Christ Greenfield just did this, and here's what we learned from that. What if we did that here? What could we learn from there? So that's really what I do, is kind of lead a group of churches. We call them lighthouse churches at Gloo, basically focused on innovation. And really that's the goal, is like, it's not to try to drive the churches to do something different. It's like the Lord's placed on your guys' heart what you should be doing and what your mission and vision is. Great. From that, what else can we do to learn and help advance the big C church, not necessarily a specific denom or a specific local little C church?
I love it.
That's really great, Matt. So, Matt, you talk about your passion for identifying patterns. What are some of the patterns that you're seeing today in the American church, when you think as a patterns guy?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I'm seeing right now is there's definitely some noticeable trends. I would say it's a trend, not quite a pattern yet, because I'm still trying to look at this, is that the old motion of hierarchical top-down sort of theology and approach is going away. Like that ship has sailed. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing this dichotomy of the churches that are continuing to fall in love with the butts, budgets, baptisms, and buildings motion versus the actual growth and development of what I call disciple makers. So the example I like to give is, if you're a butts, budgets, baptisms, and buildings church, you still care about quantity without really an outcome, right? The other
the
side of the
church, the outcome is kind of what they're saying, right? Exactly.
Yeah. Whereas I want to know, how many disciple makers are you producing, right? That might mean, so I ask the question this way: are you a disciple making church? And most churches are like, oh yeah, that's us. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, or should you be a disciple maker making church? Right. And then they're like, oh wait, I want to be that one. Right. And so it's like, so there's this tension though, because the quantity side is, okay, we're making disciples. We, the church, the organization, the building, are making disciples. Or are our people making disciples? Right now, I'm a disciple maker making church from that perspective. Or, Dave Ferguson's book on Hero Maker, which I know you guys know about, and that leadership development type motion. So those are the two dichotomies, and churches are having to pick what camp they're really in. And the disciple maker making church, yes, it has a long runway, and there's some unknown to that. It's easier to control and own and govern butts, budgets, baptisms, and buildings. And unfortunately, I'm just seeing this massive chasm in between both.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, it's such an interesting time in the church right now, man. I mean, the audience that we have and the potential, putting on my Christ Greenfield like leader hat, is exponential. And what gets me more excited than the Sunday experience is leveraging the Sunday and then Monday through Saturday experience for discipleship multiplication, for the stories of people in a variety of different vocations, and even bivocationally as leaders within our ministry, them falling in love with Jesus and becoming communicators of the gospel in winsome, attractive ways in this culture. It's a longer game. I think it's not going to be it wouldn't be right now in Gilbert, Arizona, in the East Valley. It's not the quickest way to grow your church. Matt, I've said this for a long period of time. The quickest way to grow your church in a consumer America, even in a secular, humanistic, post-Christian, whatever, in our context, it still is to orient around one personality.
Exactly.
Right? I find myself pulled back into that. Well, you got to take responsibility, Tim, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's the struggle, real-time struggle for me and for us as a ministry, but we will continue to ruthlessly pursue. No, it's about women and men falling more and more in love with Jesus, recognizing their gifts, and then multiplying the message of Christ out into their variety of vocations. And so we've been a leadership development church ever since we came alongside you and Leadership Network and Gloo. So talk to us a little bit about how predictive analytics kind of marry with discipleship multiplication and leadership development.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the things that I learned early on, just growing up in the church and then being a part of a growing church, was this idea that in the entire Old Testament, the prophets really knew prophecy based upon pattern recognition. And when I look at the patterns, that actually becomes an element of prediction. Right? Because we are by nature pattern people. It's like, if I continue to do this thing, odds are the people that are in front of me that continue to do that thing were good or not good based upon that. Right. Mm-hmm. And so even the things in my early career, we were looking at ways in which it was like, wow, I'll go back to my friend's story that got arrested. It was like, well, he was following a similar pattern of people that had gotten arrested. If we could have intervened earlier on, chances are, predictably, he would have ended up on a different track from that perspective. And so it's the same instance in church. It's like, wow, here's how people are actually bumping into Jesus and making other disciple makers. Well, let's multiply that, and we can begin to predict certain things about people, which is a good thing because people want customization. They want personalization. Mm-hmm. And so, and let me say it this way, they want relevancy. That's the key, is they want relevancy to them. And so if I happen to know that, Tim, you're married and you've got kids and this is your season of life, well, I can look at all the other people in the East Valley that look a lot like Tim and say, hey, here's what people that are just in a single season ahead of you have done based upon looking just like you in the past. Now that I know that, I can serve you and be way more relevant to you because I'm looking at the patterns of people that came before you. And then I'm just applying a prediction saying, odds are you're going to end up here. So there's an example that I like to give right now. One of the patterns we're seeing in church is and I should say it this way, as a church, if you can win with the young male, so I've been saying the 35 and younger male, you'll win as a church because that is a tough demographic to reach. But if you get that group, you will crush it as a church. And so one of the things that we're seeing as a pattern is, wow, if you can get a male under 35 to submit 3 prayer requests, they are 4 times faster getting into a small group than men who do not submit prayer requests at your church. So why don't we just begin to encourage more people to pray and more people to submit prayer requests so we can pray over them? That's the pattern. Like stupid, simple observations. But one of the things that it was like, I just like observing people, not in a judgmental way, but in an observational perspective, going like, they just did a lot of this, and this group of people didn't. I want to replicate more of those people doing that thing. I'm going to do that. So it's it doesn't have to be like math oriented, like, statistician, mathematician, all this stuff. It's just an observation of people.
What are some other observations that you've been making about young men, their felt needs? I know you've done a lot of, you've developed a lot of techniques to capture the felt needs of different demographics. What are you seeing with young men?
So the top 4 things that I'm seeing right now, and I'm going to say young men, and then I'll distinguish between another demographic, is number 1 is still marriage. Okay. Yeah. Even with COVID, there are young men that are like, man, and you guys know me, I'm authentic, but it's like, man, I suck at marriage. I need to get better. Right? Like, just help me get slightly better. Yeah. And then the number 2 thing right now, and I can attest to this, even I've struggled with this, has been mental health and mainly depression. So it's not even anxiety, but it's actually, am I even good enough? Okay. So from mental health, that more of the generic sense, but if you honed in on anything, it would be overcoming some of that depression side.
What is my meaning? What is my purpose? Right. What is my value?
Because, you're coming off in the boomers who basically rewarded, and I'm a Gen Xer who basically awarded the Gen Xers with every award possible. And then we all kind of made fun of it as Gen Xers. And so our millennial kids or Gen Z kids are like, am I even good enough? You got every participation award possible and you made fun of it. And now the whiplash has come back the other way. So marriage, mental health / depression. The next one is parenting, and it's got a root of the same thing. Am I even good enough as a father? Now, biblically, where we get sideways in the church is we tend to elevate the child over the marriage. And Genesis 2:24 is very, very clear. The priority relationship in the home is husband and wife, not parent to child. Right? And so we have to get to a spot in the church where we're acknowledging parenting, but we're not elevating that over the priority relationship which is the marriage. And then lastly is for single men. Okay. Lastly is single men. Everything else has been mainly generic men and married men is mentorship and leadership. They're looking for people that are ahead of them slightly. And here's the difference that we get wrong in church. In mentorship and leadership, we either try to do the speed dating thing where it's like, hey, we'll assign you somebody. And then what happens is it becomes an appointment on your calendar. Instead, what they're looking for is to be embedded within the mentor's calendar, embedded versus an appointment. And so we like to say, go ahead, Jack.
No, so I'm this is kind of digging deeper on that. So have you seen success in that? Is that usually small group or is this one-on-one where you're embedded?
It's mainly one-on-one. And what we're seeing is they're embedded in their professional, personal, and private life. So it's their calendar, but they're embedded within it. So it would look like, especially with the technology that we have now with video conferencing and all this stuff, it's like, hey, I want you to call into this video conference meeting, and I'm going to hide your video, but I want you in my meeting, and I'm going to explain what you're doing here, that you're a mentee, but I'm embedding you in it, and then we're going to recap after my meeting, and we're going to discuss, hey, what did you hear? What did you see? What did I do? What would you think what I should have said? From that dynamic perspective. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my personal. So I'm embedding you in my family. You're seeing how I interact with my wife and my kids. And I'm embedding you in my private life of what does it look like, with the good, bad, and indifferent of the head trash that I get just mentally on my own. Right. And we're going to talk about that. And so it's different than what we've normally done with mentorship and leadership, which is, hey, marry the 65-year-old with the 35-year-old, and it becomes a 30-minute coffee break, and then everybody goes back their other direction. So that's the uniqueness that I've seen work really well. But that's number 4 is the felt need around mentorship and leadership.
So I'm thinking like the Big Brothers program that we've heard about in the past is like, hey, this kid needs a big brother, but it's like a much more grown-up version of that. Is that
right? Yeah. That's right. That's a really good parallel.
Right.
I guess, how have you seen practically, because I'm very concerned, interested, passionate about our single men as marriage, the average date of marriage, I got 3 young men that I'm working with right now who have been in a prolonged dating relationship, are just worried about commitment, their families. These are some general things. Their families are kind of a mess. Brothers and sisters who are far from the Lord. So they've been brought back to faith in many respects, baptized young, but away for 25 some years. And now they're coming back and they want the church. They want what we offer, but it's hard to make those natural connections. So what I've done, and correct me if this is wrong, is I meet with this young man. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's just networking connection. And then I truly, as I hear his story, I'm praying about the 2 or 3 men that I really believe would, like you say, and I love that language, embed this young man in their lives. And then I make the warm handoff. I grab coffee, lunch with them, introduce them to one another. And then you kind of see if there's that connection. And then I, as a leader, am checking in with that respective older adult, one season ahead, just to see kind of how it's going. I'd like it to become more of a system. And Jack, this is where maybe you could be like, there needs to be some replication of this sort of an approach. So that's kind of the warm handoff network approach for a church leader. Have you heard of any other approaches working to enter into that big brother relationship?
So here's what I've seen work really well, and it's super sticky, is that you actually flip it onto the mentee. You actually say, hey, somebody that you look up to, right? So you go find your mentor, and they know people. That's the thing. Now all we're doing then is we're setting the stage for them to bring their mentor with them to like, maybe it's just a couple of week class where you're basically teaching the embeddedness of what this relationship looks like, but you're teaching it to the mentor and the mentee all at the same time. And that's you're creating this sticky factor where it's like, okay, now they're a lifelong friend. And what's happened is this would be like me going to you, Tim, and being like, hey, Tim, would you mind mentoring me? Immediately, you probably think a couple of things. I would love to, but I don't feel equipped to. And Matt, why would you want me to mentor you when I'm only a year ahead of you? Like only a year, right? And so what makes you, like, you should be asking somebody who's 20 or 30 years older than me to mentor you. No. I look up to you, Tim. So my church, Christ Greenfield, I went to them saying, I'm looking for mentorship. You guys flip it onto me saying, great, people, go find your mentor. And we're going to train you both. And then I go to you, and then you and I join at the hip, go to this, sort of onboarding sequence, whatever that looks like. Mm-hmm. And now you and I are in this unique relationship where you're catalyzed because you feel an affinity toward me. Wow, Matt just asked me to mentor him. Like, that's honoring and a lot of responsibility and a privilege all at the same time, right? Yeah. But it's now sticky. And the beauty of this is, guess what? Tim doesn't have to be a believer. But if I, Matt Engel, could bring my non-believing person that I look up to church to get trained and developed in a biblical sense of leadership and mentorship, what am I doing now as a church? Holy crap, Matt is out making disciples without ever even having to talk about Jesus. Right? So there's this unique flip of paradigm versus us doing all of it. I'm not discounting how you set it up, but I think the scalable motion is more about, well, Matt knows people. Go ahead, Jack. Yeah.
No, I was also thinking like the multiplicative impact of this. If the young man is taking ownership of identifying a mentor, and they're being equipped together through some type of program, right? You're equipping the coach, you're equipping the person being mentored, but the person being mentored now is also processing this experience and starting to think about what they would be investing in the future because they've gone through this process now, right?
That's right. So 100%.
Right.
I mean, think about this even from back to what you were saying, Tim, of this, prolonged dating season. there's two thoughts to that. One is, hey, our premarital stuff has become so laborious that they're only showing up to church to basically get the approval of a pastor to marry them. When in all reality, what we should be saying is, hey, you're here with me. You go find a mentor couple that you guys look up to as a dating couple. And we're going to develop you both in that same mentee-mentor relationship. It just so happens our frame of reference is going to be marriage. And what does it look like from that perspective? And now we're going to talk about, and think about the authenticity here. Now you have a mentee talking to a mentor that they look up to, even though we all can agree the mentor couple probably sucked at something along the way. Whereas typically in the church, it's like we have our core group of people that we like, that we know that want to be passionate about marriage, that maybe, again, they're 65 and you're talking to a 30-year-old that's dating. So there's some unique dynamics here where we equip the person that looks to be mentored with the capacity to tap into their own sphere of influence, regardless of faith background. And the only agreement is, hey, we're willing to walk alongside you as a church. You just need to bring that couple so that we can teach both of you guys the spectrum at which we talk about mentorship or pre-marriage or whatever.
So I think for the church,
go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, Jack. I think for the church, the dynamic that you're talking about is our small group approach. Find 2 or 3 of your friends. And so the same thing can proactively be done for mentorship and hopefully future discipleship, Jesus-focused natural relationships. Because honestly, when people come to me and to most pastors, it's because something's really fallen apart. We're the fallback guy. Like my life is about ready to totally collapse. Let's give Jesus and this Jesus guy a try.
That's right.
That's kind of it. But if we were to set up this consistent, I'm just summarizing what you say. If we were to set up these consistent rhythms of training for small group leaders as they find 2 or 3 of their friends, or for the young single or newly married couple, for them to come and receive with a mentor couple that they've identified training. So I really think that's and the training doesn't have to be laborious. It can be fun. Nope. It doesn't have to be like, you got to figure out the catechesis and every question that you could possibly understand about the Bible. It's just some churches that standardize a rhythm of a very accessible training are winning. Is that what I hear you saying as people self-identify? Yep.
That's right. And think about this. We hear, I got the same thing. People that are hurting and broken show up to my doorstep as a pastor and they're like, help me. That is the fraction of the church. Most people are not in that spectrum.
Agree.
But most people are sitting here going, I suck, but I want to get better. But I'm not in that desolate age or season of like everything's falling apart. It's like, I can just acknowledge that I suck, but I want to get better. So imagine our approach when we start elevating the fact that, hey, 80% of our people are in this bell curve. The 10% that are broke, yes, bring them to me because we probably need a pastor. And then we might even need a professional clinician to help move, people in that season. And then we have people that are like crushing it. Well, I want to deal with the mass because I can get an economy of scale there. And so in that instance, it's really, how can we just slightly help develop the culture where it's like, wow, it doesn't take a lot to be mentored. It doesn't take a lot to look up to somebody. And really what it is it's the reverse shoulder tapping that we've all been taught. Instead of me tapping, Jack saying, I see in you conversation, it's now Matt tapping Tim saying, I see in you, Tim, with you and your wife. You guys have something that me and my dating partner or me as a male in leadership, I look up to. So it's that same conversation. It's just flipped on its head a little bit.
That's fascinating. The idea of a reverse I see in you conversation. We teach it so much that leaders need to know how to do it, but how do you equip the everyday person, the everyday church member, the everyday person who's even unchurched, but somehow in relationship with you, that they can shoulder tap somebody to be a leader for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
Wow.
So good. I'm pumped, man. There's so many directions I would want to go right now. We're running short on time. I'm going to ask this question. If you could become God, which is a scary thought there, Matt Engel, if you could become God for one day and snap your fingers, change the average American pastor, what would you change in the average American pastor?
Well, my joke to that is I'd outsource prayer. Outsource prayer, and so that we don't have to waste our time praying. It would just be outsourced. No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks.
I think one of the things that as I look around, one of the challenges that I see right now, and it's been a pattern that's probably existed now for 20, 30, maybe even 40 years, has been this weird motion in the church where we think we have it all figured out. And there's almost a resistance to healthy input because we don't know how to process as pastors and leaders the input, because we look at it as, and let me use just a practical example of me and my wife, Denise, at Christ Greenfield. It would be us at Christ Greenfield and me approaching maybe you, Tim, or Jack. And Jack's kind of in this, executive role that's to try to protect him in certain instances. And so there might be a little bit of like me showing up to you guys and saying, hey, have you thought about this? Or have we thought about that? And Jack's walls go up like, we're not doing anything different. You're talking about wanting to do CrossFit at the church. Nope, we're not going to do that because we're not a CrossFit thing. Or you want to change our small group. No. It's the humility of our leaders to acknowledge that we are not the smart people in the room. We only have hypotheses that need to be tested on the street. And we need more input from the street in order for us to do our job better. And so I think if I could snap my fingers and play God for a split second, I think that's what I would try to go after. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to churches and I'm like, hey, have you guys thought about this or this? Oh, Engel. And there's this kind of dismissive thing. And then those leaders end up at a conference that I'm giving the keynote at. And all of a sudden they show up on my doorstep going like, Matt, can you get in? And I'm like, I was with you guys 8 months ago on your property saying, hey, have we thought about this? And now, because I'm in front of 1,000 pastors and leaders and people that you supposedly look to, and they asked me to show up, now all of a sudden you want it. So if I could, like I said, if I could change anything, I think I would try to address the hesitation we have of input, and then the capacity for us to digest that, knowing that it's not an indictment of our ministry, that people are passionate about wanting to contribute value. And if I heard it through that lens, and if I was re-vectored on what does it look like to me, for me as the pastor of Christ Greenfield to be a disciple maker, that input to me probably flips into a conversation. That's a great idea. I want to equip you to go do that thing because you're going to do it with or without my church. My job is to ensure that whatever it is you're talking about doing is done through a biblically grounded, rooted, Jesus following motion, period. Right. That was a little bit of a tangent, but I bump into that so often, guys, and it breaks my heart. It truly does.
That's really good. Churches, especially churches that are developing leaders, hierarchy is inevitable. It's a matter of administration. But what you would hope ideally for a church is that, yes, there is an administrative structure that exists, but that you are spiritually flat. Right. And this is especially, should be convicting to, speaking to the Lutherans, priesthood of all believers. Right. We are all in the priesthood of all believers. A pastor is just holding one of those offices. Right.
That's
so we're all in this. We're all in this together. Ministry is everybody's job. Right.
That's right. Exactly.
Ultimately, Matt, Jesus is the only one, and his Spirit is the only one that can do this work. Where our identity, because it really is an identity and then meaning and purpose issue. Our identity is not in what we do, it's what's been done. And so by Jesus on the cross and through the empty tomb and signed, sealed, and delivered to us in the waters of baptism. And if leaders, pastors have that sort of, those who are influencing the trajectory of local congregations have that sort of humility, because what you simply prayed for is, could we get rid of pride? And pastors thinking,
Amen.
on the one hand, we're doing okay. And I look and I compare myself to other churches, but like none of us are reaching all of us. Like our commission is to reach everyone. So I don't care if you worship, 100,000 people or 1,000 people, or if I look at Gilbert growing like 270,000 people, and we're worshiping just about 1,000 and plus online, is like, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what we're called to do. And so we have to maintain this humility, this learning posture. And I mean, I just took 2 pages of notes, Matt, as you're talking, and I have hung out with you for forever. And I'm like, Matt, why you been holding out on me? Like, this is good stuff.
We got to keep bringing Matt on here, because every time we do a video with Matt, I'm like, okay, everybody on staff needs to see this.
Man. But I think let me just add to that really quick, Tim. I think the thing, you're right. I didn't want to say it that way because it's sort of a cheesy answer to be like, I would pray for humility. If I'm God, I'd snap my fingers and get rid of pride. But I look at the data and I look at the research across the world, and the church, the Big C church, is not winning. We are taking a beating right now, and it largely has to do with the fact that, well, it's my way or the highway, or it's top-down governance and control and compliance motions instead of bottom-up decentralization of things and allowing people to, Jack, to your point, the priesthood of all believers. Like, there are things and capacities and giftings that everybody has. Mm-hmm. And we will reach more people for Christ outside of the 4 walls of the building on Sunday if we take the posture of inputs coming in and the equipping motion to send people out. But right now, it's been all about, you can't bump into Jesus unless it's within the 4 walls of the building. And if it happens outside the 4 walls of the building, it doesn't count.
Mm-hmm. I just don't know where that's founded in Scripture, Matt. Like,
it's not. That's the hard part.
Yeah, it's like, are we sometimes, and this is the Lutheran snark in me coming out, but are we reading the Bible and understanding the works and the words and the ways of Jesus and how he did it and how he embedded himself in the life of, now my theological Jesus mind is going, think about Jesus at the well with this Samaritan woman.
Right.
Like, he hangs out with her, he calls her to repentance. He leads her to a heightened vision of what the kingdom of God looks like, what true worship looks like. And then he doesn't say, oh, well, let me go find. He says, just go and tell everyone. Yeah. She becomes, this is the reverse shoulder tapping from Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And that to me is the paramount of the humility of, I'm willing to entertain a conversation with anybody. And from that posture, if there's a little bit of value that I can bless somebody with and they can bless me with, well, now I'm in a learning posture. But by and large, we in the church, as soon as we get that badge that we're on staff or we're a pastor or whatever, it feels as though we have this stamp of approval of better than, or I have to be perceived as better than, or I have to be perceived as I have the right answer. Instead, we should be embracing this idea that, the smartest people in the room don't work for you. They work for somebody else. I mean, so if that's true, how can I go work with other people that are smarter than me? Right. And that requires just a boatload of humility, but it's super attractional. When I look at the churches that are thriving, the churches that have more authenticity about where they're gapped, and it's not done in a way in which it's like reversed sort of pride. It's, hey, we're gapped here. Input from anywhere. We don't care. What can I learn from CrossFit that I can apply into the local church? Right. So yeah. Anyway, a little bit of a tangent. I know that was a long-winded thing, but
that's nails. So you wrote a book called 14 Fridays with Eric Swanson. What were the primary lessons in that book, Matt, you wanted to get across?
Yeah, I think the big thing for us is, we've had, 20 years for me ministry experience of learnings and just observations. And it's like, okay, how can we get this out there And then with Eric being older, I mean, he's got probably 45, 50 years experience. I probably just dated him too old, but that's right. When Dirk was young, Eric decided to get into ministry. But that it was really just this idea of there are some common operating systems for every church. There's some common patterns that exist in every church, and if we can just somehow get that out there in an easy, digestible way, it doesn't matter where you fall in the UMC church, where you fall in the Lutheran church, where you fall in the Baptist. It doesn't matter about any of that stuff. All those abstractions can be applied to your church setting, your ministry setting, and you can begin to advance wherever the Lord's got you. And like I said, ministry could be the local CrossFit gym that can say, wow, I have the similar operating system that a church does. And I'm a believer, and I can treat my CrossFit like a ministry. So I have to solve for all the same jobs, and I have to look at data and patterns and research and theology and understand it all. So it's just a fun way to capture all the things that we've kind of seen up until, we wrote it a couple of years ago now. So, up until a couple of years ago, now we're learning a bunch of other stuff. So.
Yeah. Amen, Matt. One of my great passions in just being your friend and watching others who live in their passion area is you have so clearly identified this is why I was put on planet Earth, to locate patterns, take it or leave it. I mean, you're not a guy that really cares much about what I or anyone else thinks about you. We share that, Jack, and we all share that same value. So what does a perfect day look like for you when you're in your sweet spot? Simply say what a perfect day for Matt Engel looks like.
Waking up with my wife, being able to get my kids off to school, or, at least, and if I have to do that virtually because I travel so much, but being with my wife and my kids up early in the morning, the thing that I've elevated probably over the last 3 or 4 months, or not months, years, that I've been a little bit more keenly intentional around is just my mental health side of the equation, because I do get pulled in a lot of directions, and there's a lot of churches that I serve. So there's a head trash moment that I have to start balancing better. So that, and then I would say it's largely just trying to provide value to others. And that could be at an org level. It could be at a person level. It could be, in a variety of different contexts, but my ultimate day just says, I'm giving value. I'm contributing more than I'm consuming. And there's a consumptive nature in growth. So it's not saying I don't consume anything, because I can always benefit from a conversation. But there's this idea that I love going to bed at night going like, man, if they go out and do 1/10 of what I said, based upon the things that I've seen, they're going to be massively successful. And I won't even know the people that are impacted by that conversation or podcast or book or whatever. It's like, and I actually enjoy it. I don't like being in the spotlight. I actually love the idea of people ripping. And I used to do this all the time, especially at the church. It was like, I would make up a term like Uberization, and I would make it up and I would sprinkle it out there. And I love to sit back and watch the term mitigate, migrate throughout this whole ecosystem. And I'm like, that term didn't exist until I just made it up or something like that. So that to me is like, it's just a fun day when I can see things like that I get to do. And then just being able to pray with my kids and my wife and giving her a kiss at night and go to bed. That's a fun day for me.
Beautiful. I love it. Have you heard of epigenetics, Matt? So epigenetics simply means our gene structure, and then epi is above. And there's a lot of recent research, and this is at the, cellular level, that our genes are speaking to us. And when we, and this is why we're fearfully and wonderfully made, Psalm 139, I just referred to it this past Sunday, but when we are in our sweet spot and we're giving our lives away, when we're trying to serve and contribute rather than just consume and protect, our genes literally tell our bodies that, hey, you're okay, you're safe. So this is all about mental health, right?
That's great.
Best way we grow mentally is when we serve, and our genes literally say, you're gonna be all right. And here's why I know, because you're giving your life away. The opposite is true though. When we protect, when we defend, when we're anxious about the future and worried about the way we're observed by other people in the present, our genes literally tell our bodies, you're not okay, you're not safe. And guess what happens then? Inflammation, disease, isolation. So the church has a major role to play just in holistic health today. Heart, body, mind, spirit. So Matt,
I love that. That's what I needed. So you just
well, you added 45 minutes of value to us, and I gave you 30 seconds of wisdom. So it was a joy. Matt, if people want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Just probably my email, M for Matt, and then last name just ENGEL at gloo.us, gloo.us.
And if people want to look up Gloo, is it gloo.us, gloo.us, to look up what Gloo does?
Yep, exactly.
Absolutely. You are a gift to the body of Christ, Jack. Wonderful work today. And it is a fantastic day to be a leader within the local church. You have been placed for such a time as this, in this crazy secular blah, blah, blah age, to multiply disciples, to be not just a place where you make disciples, but multiply disciples, all for the elevation of the name of Jesus. And you will do whatever it takes, use whatever means possible so that more people know and follow Jesus and share his love with the world. Lead Time is here every single week. Sharing is caring. Please subscribe, like, comment. All of that really helps us get the word out. And we are setting up wonderful conversations with leaders within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and outside. Matt, we still love you. You're a big C church guy, and we share that value with you, bro. And you're always welcome here at Christ Greenfield. And I pray in any Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregation. It's a good day. Go and make it a great day. We'll see you next time on Lead Time. Peace.
God bless.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC consults and brings together cohorts of congregations to build the culture, systems, and structures of intentional discipleship multiplication. To go deeper with us, create a free login on uniteleadership.org for access to exclusive materials and resources. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode.